one of the things I think we also got to take into consideration is what the teams showed us when they were and who and why I'm optimistic. One, it's easy to say, like, to discount the LSU win because LSU wasn't ranked when we beat them last year. And a lot of people now say it was a barely won, which I'm like, you clearly didn't watch the game. You're looking at the final score, which is 24-23. Florida State dominated up until the last 5 minutes, where I will say Jaden Daniels took full advantage of what they of the time and moving the ball, as well as LSU's defense stiffened up and stopped Florida State. I can joke and say Lawrence Toafili fumbled the ball, but at the end of the day, would he have fumbled the ball if they were some chumps? There was some pressure in that situation. Turnovers are cost, whether you like it or not, and they recovered it. Then they stopped Florida State again when they could have done something. But when we go back and we look at it, yeah, LSU, and I think Brian Kelly is one of the best coaches in college football. Wake Forest had Sam Hartman, who is now at Notre Dame, and now people are thinking Notre Dame is going to be good because he was one of the better quarterbacks in college football. At the time, Boston College, their quarterback, who's at Pitt now, was considered one of the best quarterbacks in college football. A lot of people were touting the ACC as being one of the best quarterback conferences when the season started. NC State quarterback got knocked out. DJ Ukulele, whatever his name is, good night. He had a Heisman performance that night. But after that, Florida State did something that's just, no matter how you shake it, it's very difficult to put up averaging over 40 points a game in a 6-game stretch against a defensive coordinator and Kevin Steele, who is considered one of the best defensive minds in football. He's now the defensive coordinator at Alabama. That's how good he is. Now he got a 45 spot put on him. Dino Babers isn't a defensive guy, but he's considered one of the best offensive minds in college football. That's how he got his job. He was only able to muster up 3 points, and he's been able to score on Florida State in the past. I'm not going to say about Billy Napier's old team, but Billy Napier kind of got an advantage if we really think about it. We played his old team, which still used his old systems. Then he got a chance to see what his stuff looked like in real life, then played against Florida, which they did a good job. We still put up 45 points. And I don't know if anybody realizes who Oklahoma's head coach is. But again, he's one of the guys who was basically learned how to stop the spread offense. Florida State put up 35 points on him and Oklahoma. And then when we go back, everybody's critique of Florida State is that we don't recruit high school kids. You know what Oklahoma's done very well the last decade? Recruit high school kids. Florida's done better than us recruiting high school kids. Miami's done better than us recruiting high school kids. Clemson is one of the best at just recruiting who they recruit. And Dabo's a good coach. It's just a lot of things that happen. And I think there's the growth. And the one thing that I learned from, and Mark, you've seen me through Tag being hired, Mike Norvell getting here first, and now with Tag getting hired and leaving Jimbo to Mike Norvell being here. And I wasn't always cheery on Mike Norvell. Would you agree with that? I would agree. I'm critical because that's my job. But to not see that and see the progression, that's what I would like. Not for you per se. I'm talking about for other people. That would be considered a hater. And I've never been that. I can troll, but I appreciate things that are good. And I think even Tate Rodemaker, like, I think people the best game on his schedule was the Louisville game. We literally lost Jordan Travis early in that game. And Tate, we saw a guy grow up right in front of our eyes. I said some very nice, so I'll take this opportunity. Every opportunity I get, I take to apologize to Tate Rodemaker because I said some things that were hurtful that I probably shouldn't, that I said in anger. I said, I don't even think he's a good person anymore. I think he hates Florida State. I think he was what do they call it? A plant, an industry plant to keep us down. But then he came back and he started balling. And I'm just like, okay, well, I was wrong. And that makes me even hopeful for the 24 season. Not saying we're going to win a natty with Tate, but just seeing how he was able to move the ball on a team that wasn't really that bad. It's just it's impressive. I just think it's hard to dictate, it's hard to predict, but there is data that we can glean from off of past performance to try to predict future behaviors. That's what we all do. Now, I will say this: my boy Blake, who's a Florida fan, who's one of my lawyers, does love telling me that 15 of the guys who were ranked in the top 25 preseason were unranked at the end of the season. And I'm like, I don't know if he's trying to make that seem like we're going to be unranked or what the deal is, but multiple things can be true at the same time.
Last 3 seasons, I went through the last 3 years. Yeah, my count was 13 of the 25 in the AP did not finish ranked. But in the top 10, 3 of the 10 the last 3 years didn't finish ranked. So if you're going to look at the top 10 and think that trend's going to continue, find 3 teams that won't even finish ranked out of the top 10. Washington would be at the top of my list if I was going to go through the top 10. Not that I'm saying they're going to be unranked. I'm just saying they would be at my top of my list of unranked teams at the end.
Well, look, we started unranked last year and ended up almost making the top 10. So hopefully we can be that one that starts at 8th and moves all the way down there to 1. But we'll see. Look, last year it wasn't quite there for Mike Norvell. We still had some holes. The first team on both sides of the ball was pretty good, but we saw depth on the interior of the defense get questioned or challenged and didn't necessarily hold up for that blip of 3 games in the middle of the season. We kind of caught those teams also. They kind of fell off after those games, but at the time we caught all 3 of those teams, like y'all said, they were ranked, and we went down. We didn't have much special at tight end. Norvell, in his 4th year, he's kind of plugged those holes. Those question marks are gone. We feel like we have the depth we need at defensive tackle. I feel like number 2 and number 3 are both better than their first and second options off the bench last year. So it's like way less of a drop off to the second option. Hopefully Fabian Lovett, there's no week 0 game. So hopefully everybody goes into week 1 absolutely healthy to start the game. Braden Fisk has been a revelation in camp. There's just, especially with the tight ends, Kyle Morlock, Jaheim Bell, and Marcuston Douglas, I'm looking for them to have major years last year. And tight end was kind of afterthought at the beginning of the year last year. But going into this game, all 3 of those guys are going to be locked and loaded to go on with Keon Coleman and, like I said, Braden Fisk, Gilbert, Edmond on the defensive end. We're ready. It's kind of Mike Norvell's year to show everything he likes to do, be it on offense or defense. He's got no excuses. He's loaded, locked and loaded at every single position.
Appreciate y'all being here at the Voice of College Football. We do this each and every Wednesday, 6 o'clock Eastern Time. We got James Coleman here. Catch him on Den Media Group. We've got the link in the chat. You've got no excuses. Check it out. And Spear Addicts as well. The link's in the chat. Join Chris and James on Thursday night, 7:30 Eastern Time. We got George's link from Renegade Report. That's in the chat. Sub up, George, especially. Push him to 1,000. Let's get him up to 1,000. Everybody get on over there and sub up George. George is hosting our post game here at the Voice of College Football for Florida State as well. So post game, Florida State LSU. And I got to admit, I'm leaning LSU. Slight lean.
With the points or?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Heads up or with the points?
Well, what are we looking at? Isn't LSU like a 2 or 3 point favorite?
2.5, I believe, the last time I saw.
Yeah, well, anything under a field goal, if I'm picking a team to win, I'm probably going to give the points, even though I wouldn't want to, because this one could be, look at last year, 1 point. And I just think I think it's a similar matchup. They're just both elevated. They're just both better. They came into this game, I think last year, roughly the 20th best teams in the country. And now they're more like 10 or 12 or 15 spots better than that. I think the poll's actually fairly close on that for as little stock as I put in the AP voters. I think they're pretty close on this one.
Yeah, I mean, we both started unranked, both kind of climbed the ranks. We had that 3-game blip. LSU's losses were kind of more separated. So in the voters' eyes, I can see how they could be a little bit ahead of us. But like we've talked about, I think both teams are a lot better. It just kind of comes down to who has more question marks. I feel like that's LSU. I feel like we're the more complete team. But I've heard guys say they like certain playmakers on LSU. Is there somebody on their team that you think just, FSU can't handle or something like that?
Well, I like these two dudes on defense, Mason Smith and Harold Perkins. So Mason Smith got knocked out of last year's game really early in the game. And LSU people will say that he's better. I know they don't play exactly the same position. He's a defensive lineman. Perkins is a linebacker. But LSU people will say that he's a better player than Harold Perkins, who I thought was arguably the best defensive player in the country last year. And their offensive line had to grow up last year. They were a bunch of babies at this point last year, and they really developed into one of the best offensive lines in the country.
My only argument to those things, and those are all true statements. Perkins is a very good linebacker. He was there last year, and Smith did get hurt. But when he was playing, it was very much so not a factor. He actually got hurt because he finally made a tackle, celebrating something that he finally did.
He was actually
he was
celebrating
celebrating.
someone else's tackle.
Yeah, my bad. I apologize. Celebrating somebody else's tackle, which is worse. But the crazy part about all of this is that young offensive tackle that LSU had to break in, which was a terrible way to start your first game, was against a Jared Verse who everybody projected. Well, Jared Verse is back. It's not, and Jared Verse got better. Like Jared Verse didn't just like go into a time portal and like just freeze and stay the exact same way. It's the reason why he's a projected top 10 pick. That guy is still there, along with a host of other guys who were there who had a great game against these guys, and your defense is better. I think sometimes what people look at is that we fall in love with these guys and they are better, but the other team is returning 85% of their production that beat them, that got better as well. And in particular, where LSU on defense is struggling is in their secondary. Much ado about nothing has been made about Florida State in the transfer portal, but like LSU lived in the transfer portal pretty heavy this year and still can't, and the reports from camp are they still can't find that synergy in the secondary. But where did Florida State actually get better and improve? It's in the wide receiver core. You got Johnny Wilson that's come back. You have Keon Coleman. Now we can discuss about Destin Hill and whoever else will play that slot receiver role, but you've got this thing that Florida State did not have last year in Jaheim Bell. But we did have a tight end there that did make a catch. The difference is this tight end makes that catch. This tight end don't get caught. So what I would ask, and what I'm going to ask when I do my show on Sunday and then when we have our LSU guy here, is if in an RPO system, what is Perkins' responsibility? Is it going to be to guard Jaheim Bell? Is it going to be to shadow Jordan Travis? Is it going to be to help provide pass rush to to the offensive line that has the most career starts in anybody in college football, which would arguably be a good offensive line? Or are they going to help pressure to provide pressure to the wide receiver? So if you're blitzing more, that means you're going to put your secondary that's all brand new in one-on-one situations with two receivers who are shy of 1,000 yards, a tight end that's dynamic, that's basically just a bigger wide receiver. And to top it off, you've got one of the best returning running backs in the nation, and Trey Benson. So when I look at those matchups, I have to argue. I'm like, well, I like those two guys, but in any math, you don't have to be a math major to see 5 to 6 always will counteract 2. And you have to be, and there's rules that defense has to do. So that's why I like, what is Perkins? Obviously that's their job to show us on the game. But in us all deducing, I'm like, well, what is Perkins going to do? Because he can't do. Now, if he can do everything, man, I would say he needs the challenge the NFL's rule for not letting you leave until you're a junior. Because I think he's a sophomore, right?
Yeah.
So like he needs to, because he is extremely talented. But I do think the X factor is what kind of quarterback Jaden Daniels will be in this game. Because they're not going to play back like they did in the last 5 minutes. They're going to probably play him closer to what they played last time. And you lost actually, I can't even argue because none of their wide receivers played necessarily well that game. They played better as the season went, which again, I don't know if that's because our DBs were just that much better at that point or what happened. But I just all in all, what I don't want to ever say is no matter how confident I feel in the win, it is LSU, and LSU is a respectable opponent, and I would never say it's going to be a blowout, even though we did almost see that in last year's game. But we also saw what can happen. One play can flip everything around, which is why you got to love college football.
I would have never expected, let's say 2 years ago, that I would be sitting here saying that Jordan Travis is I don't know if he's a lot better quarterback. I know he's not a lot better quarterback than Jaden Daniels, but he, to me, is a safer selection, and it has a higher floor than Jaden Daniels, in my estimation. Like, I think I am more confident of what Jordan Travis is going to do in that game than Jaden Daniels. I can see Jaden Daniels going off, having a great game. I can see him being a little scattershot because he tends to do that, and having a pretty sketchy game where I'm more sure about what I'm going to get with JT.
I'm going to use what Bobby Bowden said. He said, usually the team with the better players wins the game. And to me, Florida State offensively just has way more weapons than LSU. There's one wide receiver that you have to worry about with LSU. There's 4 you have to worry about with Florida State. There's one running back you have to worry about at LSU. There's 3 you have to worry about at Florida State. That's why I give Florida State the slight edge. It's because of the amount of weapons. That's why JT, in all reality, is the safer pick, because he has by far more weapons to throw to. He's going to be asked to do a lot less with his legs than Jaden Daniels is. He's going to be asked to do a lot. And I think this year you're going to spot Daniels where you didn't do it until the second half last year at Florida State with what's my guy's name?
Deloach.
No, the linebacker, our linebacker.
Kayla?
Thank you, Deloach.
That's what I said, Deloach.
Oh, I didn't hear you then. I heard different. But anyways, I think Kalen DeLoach is going to spy Daniels for the majority of the game. And he proved last year that he was fast enough in the second half to keep Daniels contained, because Daniels went from running the ball very effectively in the first half to only being able to do it twice in the second half at an effective rate anyway. That's the only reason I give Florida State the edge over LSU. Like, if LSU had 1 or 2 more wide receivers or a couple more weapons on offense, I think defensively they match up very well with us. They have a defensive line. We have a defensive line. The only problem they have is their secondary. But if their defensive line can do their job and put enough pressure on Jordan, then they can eliminate some first downs. But I don't think that LSU's offense has the necessary weapons to keep up with Florida State when it comes to scoring. That's the only reason that I'm giving Florida State the slight edge. I picked Florida State to win last year, but I told everybody I thought it would be somewhere between 2 to 3 points in difference. This year I've got Florida State winning 38-27. That's an 11-point difference. So the only reason is because of the amount of depth that Florida State now has that it didn't have last year. The defensive line in particular is going to be really special for Florida State. I don't know who they're going to double team. Are you going to double team Pat Payton? Are you going to double team Jared Verse? Are you going to double team Fabo? Are you going to double team Fisk? You're not going to double team all of them. So you got to pick your poison at that point. That's why I think that Florida State's defense can disrupt what LSU is going to try to do. And I know Brian Kelly, he's stubborn as stubborn gets. He runs the ball 50 times a game. And I don't care what happens at halftime. He is stubborn enough to keep trying the same exact thing over and over again.
Yeah, they've played a lot of times, man. Mike Norvell's had his number in 2021, taking him to overtime with that team that he had. And Notre Dame, I believe, was a dark horse playoff, contender headed into that season. There's something about it. When it comes to Jordan Travis versus Jaden Daniels, I just feel like Jordan Travis is a better point guard, if you will, better at distributing and making the team around him better.
Well, he's Michael
They
Jordan.
both leverage the line with their legs, but it's like Jaden Daniels really has to lean on that more than Jordan Travis so much as just using it to throw down the field. And he's better at reading defenses and using his eyes to manipulate them, in my opinion. There's levels to quarterback play, and Jordan Travis, like the throwing part, is just a couple steps above where Daniels is at right now, no matter how electric he is with his feet.
Okay. Well, I certainly don't have the depth of knowledge of LSU personnel as I scan the roster. I know these guys, but to speak to their strengths and weaknesses beyond what I did would be me reaching. So we'll have our LSU guy here. Our guy Carter's going to jump on with us next week, and it should be a good matchup discussion for sure.